Thank you for bearing with us during the technical issues. So this is Kirill. He's going to be talking about ansible-docsmith, the ultimate tool to document your Ansible roles. So over to you, Kirill.
Thank you very much. So as it was mentioned, my name is Kirill Satarin. I'm from Red Hat, a principal software engineer creating SAP Ansible collections. Here I'm presenting personal opinion from the community. Yeah. So what I would like to talk about today. First, I would like to put everyone on the same page about what are Ansible roles, what are the components, and specifically which components are important for documentation, for documenting Ansible roles. Then I would like to kind of take a bit deeper look into two tools. One is community tools, which is actually a great tool. I personally use it. And another one, recently emerged community tool from Phone Data. Here I have to mention that I'm not in any way affiliated with ansible-docsmith. I'm not a developer, I'm not a maintainer, I'm just a happy user. Yeah. Then there will be some demo where I will try to demonstrate what are the features of ansible-docsmith I like, and then there will be some kind of comparison and conclusions. Yeah. So what's Ansible role? Actually, if you so in order to create Ansible role, you just run simple command ansible galaxy role init, and then you have to supply the role name, which is the one without any spaces. Yeah, basically string this without spaces. And this is how it looks like. By default, you create. Oops, sorry. By default, following structure is created, and we are interested in three main parts, I would say. Argument specification in meta folder, main YAML in meta folder, and readme. Yeah. I will show how these three important parts play their role in the documentation. Yeah. So this is how meta main file looks like. Usual parameters which you supply. Basically, everything here is for information purposes. Maybe there's exception of dependencies, which are actually roles which will be executed before you run the role. Yeah, everything else is just for information. And actually, it's, as I understand, it's kind of historical. This file, this information is nowhere used, for instance, for Ansible-doc, by Ansible-doc tools or anywhere. And I just wanted to highlight this kind of a void where you have to fill it in, but it's kind of lost. The next file is readme file, which I know that everyone is using. Yeah. So this is information. The file is rendered on Galaxy ansible.com. So if you upload your collection to Galaxy or on AEP, for instance, because this engine is exactly the same, you will see this readme file rendered there. So readme.md. So this is markdown file. It will be rendered. You can see it. Yeah. So here is a sorry. So here's a comparison. This is not in any way a recommended structure for roles readme file. This is something when you generate the role, this is something which is already available. Yeah. So this is just basically sample data. Yeah. And I'm here trying to compare to modules documentation, which has much more mature ecosystem, we might say, around documenting themselves. So in order to create documentation for module, you kind of forced to do it because sanity checks will force you to provide all the information of documentation, description, all the parameters, all the options of this module, and provide examples and return values. Yeah. On the other hand, for roles, there is no such ecosystem or any checks. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, there is a sanity check for the role, so readme file exists. Yeah. So this is the only check. If you put empty readme file in a role, Ansible is pretty happy with this. It doesn't need anything. Yeah. The third, the most important from my point of view, is meta argument specifications. So this is available since Ansible 2.12, if I'm not mistaken. So this is very long time available, but not very much used, I would say. And this is a structure of this YAML file. So this is a YAML file, which has the following structure. This is entry point name, and I will talk about what are entry points for the role a bit later. Yeah, and then we have for the role description, short description, full description, some information related to collection if this role in collection, author, and options for the role, which are actually validated. But they are validated dynamically when you call the role. There is no validation when you develop a role, for instance. And then the next entry point. So this is a list, or rather dictionary of entry points. Yeah. So what are these entry points? Actually, entry points, they're just files in your task folder. Yeah. Every time you include or import the role, you can have these tasks from, and here comes entry point name. Yeah. They are rarely used, so I'm almost certain you don't use those. Anyone who uses entry points for roles? Okay.
In one place.
Three hands. Three hands. Okay, 4. Okay. Yeah, I would argue that this is, if you have a separate functionality for the role and you want to use entry points, just create several roles for that, actually. Yeah. So, and on the collection on ansible-docs side, there is actually main file, usually information from the main file, so from the main entry point is rendered. Yeah. So idea is that you don't need these entry points additional, you just need main file. This is just something I'm thinking about. Yeah. So sum that up. So we have readme.md file, which contains kind of information about documentation about the role, which is managed manually. We have, and it's on galaxy.ansible.com. Yeah. If you would create a website with the documentation for the collection using ansible-doc tool, yeah, you will actually render this argument specification there. Yeah, the RST files and later HTML files will be rendered from argument specification. So we have a mismatch between README file, which you have to manage manually, and the actual argument specification, which is actually the source, single source of truth for the role. Yeah? And there is a third, which I think rarely used. You can actually get information for the role using this ansible-doc command. Yeah? Which is also from the argument specification. So argument specification seems like a nice place to have all the information for the role and somehow render it out of the roles. But there is not much place because this is kind of hard YAML structure. Yeah. So this is ansible-docs, which is a community tool to build collection docs and later collection website. Yeah, and it generates RST and later things. This is kind of workflow. Yeah, and docsmith. So docsmith is a tool only for the roles. So this is clearly kind of missed functionality. I don't think they tried to implement anything but the roles documentation. Yeah, and it's pretty easy to install. There is already version 2.0. Yeah. So 2 features I like in this tool. First is validate specification and generate validate argument spec, and then based on the argument specification generate readme files. So what actually problems we are trying to solve? So first, not all the attributes are there, and I would like to put a little bit more attributes in the argument specification in order to render them. Yeah, and of course I don't want to maintain separate readme if I'm trying to put all the documentation in argument specification file. Yeah, and thus releasing myself of managing readme file and having only one single source for role documentation. Yeah, demonstration. Oh, it's kind of strangely looking. Okay, I hope this looks good. I can do and like this, but last year I told that this is better. Okay. So this is just an example collection where we have one role. So all the information is here. We have some parameters. Don't look at the role. This is just an example role. And in order to run commands here, I'm using makefile. So here make. Is it visible? Not really. So we have several commands. Yeah. For role 1, this is just generated file by default. Nothing changed there. Yeah. So first of all, we will validate using ansible-docsmith. Yeah, to be honest, I don't see on my screen anything because of full light schema. We will validate information if this information in the role is correct. So this is build time validation for argument specification. So indeed we have some issue. README exists but missing required markers. Yeah. So ansible-docsmith will not be able to manage this information inside README. So what we need to do is just copy these markers and put them actually anywhere. We are happy. So now we can, and the same actually will happen if in argument specification we have our parameters defined here. So if we remove one parameter from the role, which is actually required, this is defined in the defaults, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and we run our validation. And now it complains about that. Yeah, so this is a very nice tool, and I returned it back. So again, running validation. It's all nice. Oh, validation, yeah. So now, okay. So now I will generate for role 1. Oh. Role documentation generated from YAML file argument specification. So nice feature about ansible-docsmith that it supports custom templates. So this is actually custom template which already renders from argument specification information about role limitations, about dependencies. I'm sorry for the scrolling issue. Dependencies, license, author information, and part of the information at the bottom, license is duplicated because we have it in our markdown file. So what I will do, and some information here on top, I will just move the markers, one on top and one at the very bottom, and we'll run generate again. I'm sorry. Yeah. And we now again preview this. Yeah. So moved in all these markers. So markers mark the beginning of the end, whatever is generated by ansible-docsmith. We now generate the whole document using ansible-docsmith. In order to do that, of course, I had to put more information in the ansible-docsmith document. Yeah? And I did this just adding more entry points. So this Ansible argument specification for the role has strict schema, and you cannot add more parameters there, but you can add more entry points. And there's actually no check that this entry point exists or not. Yeah, you can just add them. And following the Python convention that double underscore variables are kind of invisible, I'm actually adjusted the template so this information is rendered differently. So this information from the double underscore sections, yeah, and rendered differently. And here you can put whatever you like, yeah, whatever, several strings, one string. You can using Jinja, which was very nice talk before, render it any way you like. You can render it not only in Markdown but in other formats as well. I think it's time to go back to presentation. Yeah, so this is just highlighting of the section. So this is what we have in YAML argument specification file, and this is, I don't know, 10 lines of code which converted this into using ansible-docsmith. This is courtesy of ansible-docsmith because they have this special Jinja filter. And yeah. So this converts this very nicely. So we don't have to maintain documentation for the role in several places. We can maintain it in just one. Yeah, and comparison. So Ansible-docsmith on the left and Ansible-docs, Ansible-doc. So Ansible-doc is still the great tool to generate documentation for the whole collection. It supports all kind of plugins, modules, roles, and so on. But for roles specifically, if your collections are all heavy, I would recommend Ansible-docsmith. And I think that's all what I wanted to share today. Question?